Today's video is brought to you by Grey Viking Games. Click the link in the description below to buy mtg Arena codes for cosmetics, packs, and more. Hey, what's up everyone? My name is Jeff, and today we're going to dive into some more Strixhaven spoilers. Dude, I love this season. Whenever we get new cards coming out, I get super excited. Super fun stuff here today as well. Make sure you guys hit the like button, subscribe, all that stuff. Let's dive right into it. All right, so first card we have is another of the Elder Dragons. I love seeing these Elder Dragons. They are pretty sweet stuff. Tanazir Quandrix of the Quandrix school. 5 mana, 4/4 Elder Dragon with flying and trample. Whenever it enters the battlefield, double the number of plus and plus encounters on target creature you control. So sweet. So if you have I've seen this effect quite a few times on different like spells or anything like that. It's actually kind of nice having this on a creature, so you can actually just be playing this with creature decks that are trying to go kind of big and stompy, and this is a really good flying tramply stompy type creature, because also whenever it attacks, you may have the base power and toughness of other creatures you control become equal to its power and toughness until end of turn. So if you have a snake, the Stone Cold Serpent, and you attack in, it has a few plus and plus encounters. So first off, it comes into the battlefield, it doubles the counters on the Stone Cold Serpent that had, let's say you played out the turn beforehand, so it had 4. All of a sudden that becomes an 8/8 that can attack in with trample. Then this attacks in on the next turn, it'll give it base power for toughness 4/4, which normally had 0, so it actually become a 12/12 attacking in after that turn. So this basically just works perfectly for the decks that are going to be playing lots of counters onto creatures that have lower base power or toughness. And so actually really big fan of Tanazir Quandrix. I think it actually has a place in Standard. I think a Simic Stompy deck just didn't quite have the right pieces beforehand, but now I think this actually adds quite a bit to it. So I think it'll be interesting. I think it's a really good top end for like a Simic Stompy deck. All right. Next one, Prismari Dragon, Galazeth Prismari, 4 mana, Elder Dragon, 3/4 flying. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you create a treasure token, which is just awesome already. Artifacts you control have tap to add 1 mana of any color. Spend this mana only to cast an instant or sorcery spell. So we already have dragons that care about treasures already. We already have lots of other things that want treasures. So this just comes in and adds a treasure, and then you can tap treasures down that are still useful to at least be casting spells, which that's one of the biggest issues with some of the like Goldspan Dragon, whenever a lot of times you actually want to cast lots of instance and sorcery spells with Goldspan Dragon to be able to target itself, to be able to make more treasures, to be able to do more stuff. This means you don't actually have to spend the treasures before you get out Goldspan Dragon if you just need to be able to shock something or do something else like that, like this, and the treasures can tap immediately and have that. And so this is actually a pretty powerful card. I'm not exactly sure where it comes in, but we already have seen the Naya Unleash Fury deck. I think that you can easily turn it into like maybe a teamer version or something else that would work just as well to kind of work with the Unleash Fury, as well as maybe having Mog to go dig for the stuff. There's a lot of other treasure token things in the set that's coming up here as well. So I'm actually really excited for this card. I think it will see play in Standard, and it's just good value in general. 4 mana, 3/4 that creates mana for you, and potentially lots and lots of extra value with mana if you're playing instants and sorceries as well. So great stuff. All right, Extus, Oriq Overlord, and the Awaken the Blood Avatar. So 4 mana, 2/4 human warlock with double strike. Decent stats already. So 4 mana, 4/4 basically. The double strike means it can get even better. Then Magecraft, whenever you cast or copy an instant sorcery spell, return target non-legendary creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So just a value card. I think this actually ends up becoming a pretty good like brawl or commander, EDH commander. Especially because you get the Mardu colors with this. With the flip side of it, Awaken the Blood Avatar, 8 mana sorcery, but as an additional cost to cast a spell, you may sacrifice any number of creatures. This spell costs 2 less to cast for each creature sacrificed this way. We've seen other cards like that, and they end up getting pretty easy to cast with certain creatures that you can have. And then each opponent sacrifices a creature, create a 3/6 black and red Avatar creature token with haste, and whenever this attacks, it deals 3 damage to each opponent. So I feel like this gets better and better the more that you're thinking about EDH rather than Standard. But I do like that these at least kind of work together, where the Extus side of this wants to play a bunch of small creature spells like Scorpion, like all that kind of stuff, where they can come back if you're casting spells. Then you cast the Awaken the Blood Avatar later on, which doesn't have to be that much later if you are able to get some other stuff in the graveyard with Woe Strider, with whatever else is actually in the format right now. Or you can use the Awaken the Blood Avatar to sacrifice all those things, put them into the graveyard, and then this will, as soon as you cast a sorcery, one of those things will be able to come back, because as an additional cost, it'll sacrifice it before it actually checks to see that it was cast. And so then you'll be able to bring back a Scorpion back to hand or something like that. So you can do some pretty cool stuff with this. I think it's a little bit too slow, even that combo. Like that's a turn 5 combo. I think that's a little bit too slow maybe for standard, but maybe like 2 copies of this to kind of work well together. It can be pretty sweet. I don't know. I'm in between on whether or not this is actually good, but you know, you can eventually potentially make this the Awaken the Blood Avatar a 2 mana spell that creates a 3/6 that deals damage, 3 points of damage every time it attacks, and kind of like Kroxa. And so maybe this is exactly the card that needs to go into a Kroxa deck as well. So I'm not sure. I think it's an interesting card for sure. We have a bunch of other really expensive spells in this format as well, though. And the cool thing about this is that you can, of course, always put stuff into the graveyard to recast them. We've seen that with Ifrit Painter or Fire Painter. And the cards like this is one of the biggest issues with Extus, is that you can't cast the Awaken the Blood Avatar from the graveyard unless you find a way to have it target just the card itself that then you can cast both sides of it. And so with this one, you can actually have, because it's instant speed, like a Torrential Gearhulk or, you know, a couple of the other ways that we found beforehand that lets you cast stuff from the graveyard. This does that. Anyway, Magma Opus. 8 mana instant. It deals 4 damage divided as you choose among any number of targets. You can tap 2 target permanents, create a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token, and you can draw 2 cards. You also have the ability to discard this from your hand and put it into the graveyard where you probably want this anyway and create a treasure token. So you can actually play a full playset of these if you're trying to find some way to reanimate spells. If your deck is built around doing that, this is a fantastic reanimation spell. The fact that it's instant speed also is really cool. But you can also just ramp yourself up in blue and red by discarding this, creating a treasure token, maybe getting up to one in the future where you can get all this value that you need out of it. And so that's actually pretty sweet stuff. So I actually am kind of hyped on this card. I think it can be really good. It depends on how powerful or how consistent we are at reanimating spells from the graveyard. And so reanimate, I don't know, you mean like casting spells from the graveyard for free. And if we could get to that, it's pretty sweet stuff. Wandering Archaic, 5 mana avatar. There's enough avatars now that I'm actually thinking about like an avatar deck. We'll see how it goes. 5 mana avatar 4/4. Whenever an opponent casts an instant or sorcery spell, they may pay 2. If they don't, you may copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. So this is that side of it. I'm not sure that you necessarily use this in standard, other than the fact that this does stack as an ability. So I think people can probably have removal for it, like, okay, well, I'm just going to Heartless Act this and pay 2 extra for it, 4 mana to kill the thing. That's fine. It's gone. But if they don't end up having enough spells, or that they're trying to cast a bunch of different things with Magecraft right now, this can be a pretty fun gotcha type spell, especially if you're playing things like Redain as well, or anything else that makes things a little bit harder to cast. It could be kind of a fun deck to make a bunch of copies of this with the mystical reflections. Make a bunch of copies of Wandering Archaic, and then anytime they cast a spell, you get to have copies of all of the different things that they're casting. That's definitely the fun side of things that you can go with this. I think this is really powerful in either Commander or, you know, in different places where lots of opponents will be casting lots of sorceries. Anytime they cast a counter spell, you would get a copy of the counter spell unless they pay 2. So in some ways, you're almost having like a 2 mana. Okay, I'm quenching your whatever thing you're going to cast. Or I get a copy. Not that it actually gets quenched, but kind of interesting. So pretty sweet stuff. I think this is really powerful Commander. The other side of it, Explore the Wastelands, 3 mana. Each player looks at the top 5 cards of their library, reveals a land card and or an instant and sorcery card. So it's an and ability. From among them, puts them into your hand, reveal this way, and then puts the rest of the bottom library in random order. Each player gains 3 life. So everyone gets to gain 3 life. Everyone gets to grab a land, and if they found a land and an instant sorcery in those top 5 cards, they get both of those all back to hand. So really powerful. If it's really cool to be able to like make sure that you get those things to your hand, I guess. And maybe you're trying to play the Wandering Archaic but don't have the mana for it. I'm not sure. I don't love these cards together necessarily. It feels like the Explore the Wastelands, Vastlands doesn't feel as good of a card. I'm not sure when you would ever really use that side unless you absolutely just need to hit a land and you don't care what they are finding. But typically at that point, you've already lost the game. So I'm not sure how good that is. or maybe there's a way to stop people from looking at top 5 cards. I'm not sure if there's a way that you can do that. There are some cards that, like, if people would look, they only look so far, but I think that's when it's ever they search, and there's a different wordings on those. All right, Flame Scroll Celebrant. 2 mana, 2/1 human shaman. Whenever an opponent activates an ability that isn't a mana ability, it deals 1 damage to that player. So any planeswalker abilities activated, any activated abilities will just go over and over and over again. This gets to just do damage, which we've seen other effects like this, I think, with another shaman that was around in, I think, one of the Ravnica decks or something like that. This has been around not too long ago, the same type of effect. But you can also pay 2 to give this +2/+0 until end of turn. And we also have the modal side of it. Revel in Silence, 2 mana. Your opponents can't cast spells or activate Planeswalker's loyalty abilities this turn. Then exile Revel in Silence. So there's also the other lesson card that does a similar type of thing. Like, you can't cast this spell until end of turn, or you give something, it has a modal side of it where you can do something else. There might just be enough of these different cards that you can just like, oh, you can't cast anything this turn. You can't cast anything this turn either. And just these 2 mana spells you can do over and over again that could just be a really hard lockdown until you set up the actual full lockdown. I'm actually kind of interested to see how mean we can be with that. It sounds kind of fun, but yeah, just stopping them. So you cast this on their upkeep, basically, to force opponents to not be able to cast any spells or activate Planeswalker's loyalty abilities on this turn. They might be able to cast something at instant speed in response because they'd be able to untap and have some mana, but in general, this will just shut down any like creatures potentially being played, anything like that. So this actually could be a pretty harsh card. All right, multiple choice, X in blue, sorcery. It says if X is 1, you scry 1, then draw a card. If X is 2, you may choose a player, then return a creature they control to its owner's hand. If X is 3, create a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. If X is 4 or more, do all of the above. So 2 mana opt, I'm not sure is that powerful, but a 5 mana opt, bounce something, and create a 4/4 blue elemental creature token is pretty awesome. It is interesting that this has no value in going over 5 mana, which means that this is either a 2 or to 5 mana spell. If you cast it for 0, it's nothing, but that's kind of an interesting card. I've not seen this version of it really ever. I feel like it should be almost like pay 1 blue mana and then pay extra for each different effect that you want to have happen. But this is definitely an interesting card. I think that if you get to the 5 mana, it is worthwhile. I think that there's enough value in that it's worthwhile. Is that worthwhile enough, though, to be playing this as a 2 mana opt? I'm not sure, because there are going to be times that you don't get up to 5 mana. You need this in the early game, and you are opting with this for 2 mana instead of getting Omen of the Sea, where you scry twice and get to draw a card, and then pay 3 mana later to scry twice again, or be able to balance it with a Yorion. I'm not sure this actually is as playable unless you're maybe finding some ways to make this cost less, so you can be doing it more often or something like that. I'm not totally sure. I think it's interesting. I'm not sure if I like it that much, though, for standard, for constructed. Elemental Evoker, another one of these 4 split ones for the Prismari colors. Orc Wizard, 4/4, and it has Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant sorcery spell, until end of turn, target creature you control gains. If the creature would leave the battlefield, exile it instead. And when this creature is exiled, create a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. So if someone was targeting your stuff, you could, instant sorcery, take care of it in that way. So it's somewhat protect. I don't really like this card that much. It's kind of protection. You can kind of do some stuff. I guess what you can do is you can target your own stuff with like a shock or some sort of destroy your own thing spell, which would then you would have the Magecraft ability go on the stack to then target your whatever thing you have, and then you would turn it into a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. And you can do that at instant speed, so maybe you can like use that to cast a bunch of shocks on cheap creatures to then create a board full of 4/4s. I feel like that's the way to break this card. That is doing something like that. But that creates such a difficult setup to make it actually powerful that I'm not sure that's worthwhile at all. And by don't think it is, I really is not very good, but I'm probably going to try it because that's what I do in this channel. So like and subscribe because that's what I do. All right, Culmination of Studies, X blue red sorcery. Exile top X cards of your library. For each land card exile this way, create a treasure token. For each blue card exile this way, draw a card. For each red card exile this way, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. And so if it's a blue and red card, so if it's a duel, then you get to draw a card and deal 1 damage to each opponent. So I think what you do is you try to ramp up with this. This is just like a good finisher. You don't actually get any valuable out of this besides you get to draw lots of cards. In the early game, this isn't very good, is what I'm trying to say. Is I think that casting this for like 3, you might get a treasure, you might draw a card, you might deal a couple points of damage to them. So that could actually be pretty good, but it's not going to be as great as if you know you're going to be casting this for like 8 mana. Once you're casting this for quite a bit more mana, where you're getting Extus 6, this becomes really busted and really powerful. And it could be a good finisher as well, where you're drawing a ton of cards, you're getting a bunch of treasure to cast the other things that you just ran into. And so this is a really, really, really powerful card. But I'm not sure if it's powerful enough to be playing on like 4 mana. I think that's the difference of whether or not this card sees play or not. Is if you cast it for 4 mana and still get a reasonable amount of value out of it, you might be able to draw a card and create 1 treasure, and it's at sorcery speed, so you can't even hold up mana to do anything with it. I think this has to be like a finisher in a deck. Which there is lots of ways to maybe create ramp in a teamer deck. This can be actually really powerful in the top end. So I do like it. I'm interested to see where it actually comes into play. Next up, we have Codie, the Vociferous Codex. And so pretty sweet little card. This is little Codie here. 3 mana, 1/4 construct. You can't cast permanent spells, which is interesting. I actually think that this might be a better spell to use Harmless Offering and like give it to someone. But the rest of this is actually pretty interesting and cool. So 4 mana, tap and add Wooburg colors: white, blue, black, red, green. Whenever you cast your next spell this turn, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile an instant or sorcery card with lesser mana value. Until end of turn, you may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Each other card exiled this way on the bottom of your library in a random order. Sorry, that's a bunch of different stuff. So basically, if you tap this for the mana that you need and then cast a 7 mana spell, then you can get something with lesser mana cost. And so if you have a 6 mana spell, you can cast that for free. And so that's pretty sweet stuff. If you can actually end up having this cast for lots of mana, I think what you do is maybe play this with something like this last spell, Culmination of Studies. You don't care about it tapping for all the different colors as long as you have the blue, red, and X, and just be playing control and have that maybe be the main way of actually finishing off the game. Is that this is just simply a way to ramp up to make your X spell a little bit better. You play this on turn 3. You don't really get a lot of ramp because you have to pay for it to tap it for 5. So it's not really that much ramp, but you also get to cast extra spells as well. So you can do some pretty cool stuff. I'm not really sure. I'm not really hyped on this one. Not being able to cast permanent spells actually affects a lot of different spells in the format. But we're probably going to play this one too, because that's what I do. All right, diving into some of the uncommon cards. There's some really powerful uncommons and common cards. I'm going to try to skim through the less good ones pretty quickly, and then kind of stay a little bit longer on the better ones, because some of these are going to see lots of play and some of them probably not as much. Grinning Ignus, 3 mana 2/2 is a reprint that is really powerful. Red mana, return Grinning Ignus to its owner in hand, and you add the mana to cast Grinning Ignus again. Activate this ability only time you cast a sorcery. Well, you can create an infinite loop with this fairly easily in Historic with Burgi. So Burgi, anytime you cast a spell, or you can do this in Standard as well, you add 1 red mana, so then you can play out Grinning Ignus. You can use that red mana to then bring it back, cast it again with the mana you just got, add 1 red mana, and you keep going back and back and back, and you can cast this as many times as you want. And in Historic, that's where you get to cast all your storm spells. So this is a great way to just increase your spell, your storm count to be able to cast Grape Shot for 20 and win the game. And so just 3 card combo there that I don't think is that difficult to get to. Burgi, Grinning Ignus, and have a Grape Shot in hand, which in red you have Faithless Lootings, you have Cathartic Reunions, all these different ways to go digging for cards, light up the stage, a bunch of ways to make sure that you can find these cards, cast them, and have them in the deck. So I think this actually becomes a really powerful combo deck in Historic. In Standard, I'm not sure exactly how to make this work. There's a few different ways to we still have Burgi, so you still can cast lots of times. It doesn't work for Magecraft, but you could cast it with like Terror of the Peaks and have it enter the battlefield over and over and over again and have infinite damage that way. So Burgi this and Terror of the Peaks is still a 3-card combo that doesn't seem that difficult to put together, but at the same time though, that's 6 + 5 mana, 11 mana over 3 turns that you have to cast these, and they all have to stay alive. So that's where it becomes a little bit more difficult, but still totally possible and awesome. And it honestly could work fairly well, even just with like an ultimatum deck, just having those pieces in the ultimatum deck along with other stuff. A Genesis ultimatum deck that goes and gets lands to be able to cast more things, and you can maybe pull it together all together at one time. So I think this actually is a pretty legit combo. We'll see. So anyway, Grinning Ignus is a really fun card. Can do lots of cool stuff with it. We'll see what else actually happens. Clever Lumimancer, Lightmancer. All right, 1 mana 0/1 with Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, it gets +2/+2 until end of turn. This card I actually think is really busted. I think this is one of those cards that it's another 1 mana 2 power thing that gets powerful. Like just like Akum Hellhound is the 1 mana red that has seen tons of play just by having lands hit the battlefield. If you ever cast instant sorceries, the biggest thing though is that there's a cap on how many lands you can play, and it's really hard to get around that. There's not as much of a cap on how many instances of sorceries you can cast, and typically those are growing the Clever Lumimancer as well. So I actually think this is one of the most powerful cards, that maybe not the most powerful, but it's going to see probably a lot of play and be really annoying. This is the same power level as Akum Hellmaster at least, and I think potentially more powerful. At the same time though, that forces decks to build less creatures and more pump spells, but that also means it's going to be really, really fast. So this card I'm actually a little bit terrified of. So really powerful card, and yeah, we'll see how it goes. And we get to see some of the different instant sorceries that could be good here. Ingenious Inspiration, 3 mana, it deals 3 damage to any target, and you get to learn. Every time I read Learn, I'm getting more and more impressed by it. The more lesson cards that we're seeing here, it gets even more and more impressive. Yes, most of the lesson cards are a little bit weaker than other stuff, but the fact that you can get it for free, or you can also just discard a card from hand to draw a card. So if you are looking for specific cards, you can be filtering to be finding the things you want. So sorcery speed, a little bit bummer there, but just 3 damage to any target. So a little bit, it's a lightning strike that draws you a card. That would be worthwhile for 3 mana. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's good stuff right there. Spectacle Mage, 3 mana, Bird Shaman, 2/2 flyer. Instant sorcery spells you cast with mana value 5 or greater cost 1 less to cast. Between this and a few other ways that we can have things cost less mana, this could actually end up adding up and be pretty cool. I'm not sure if that'll ever be competitive, but you could actually create all of these really expensive spells, get to a point where they can actually be a lot less to cast. So I'm interested to see if there is a way to make enough of these things, enough of these expensive spells to start casting less enough that then you can kind of go crazy. We saw decks with dinosaurs actually work like that, almost like as in the tier 2, almost a tier, like probably tier 2 level, but where you make the dinosaurs cost very, very little, with all the different dinosaurs cost less to cast cards, and then you were just casting Zetalpas for 2 mana and all this kind of stuff, and that gets really busted. I think this could be a similar type of effect. I'm not sure if it's actually available though. Stonebinder's Familiar, 1 mana 1/1. Whenever 1 or more cards are put into exile during your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Stonebinder's Familiar. This ability triggers only once each turn. So only once each turn, but anytime you put something into exile, that's any kind that you cast an adventure card, you get to cast a spell and you put the card into exile. And so that's pretty nice. And also it's whenever 1 or more cards are put into exile during your turn. So it doesn't matter if it's your stuff or someone else's stuff. So if you're exiling something from their graveyard, if you are doing whatever else, this could end up being pretty decent. I'm not sure if this is definitely not the level of Flourishing Fox, but it's not that weak either. Like this can easily be a 1 mana 5/5, I think, over the course of turns. And so 1 mana 5/5s are pretty good stuff as far as I know, especially with Egon being something that exiles something from your graveyard every single turn, maybe like an Orzhov fill your graveyard type deck. This is just a really good 1-drop to go into that. So I actually do like this card quite a bit. We'll see where it actually ends up in. Rootha, Mercurial Artist, 3 mana, 1/4. Pay to return it to its owner's hand, and you can copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. I think this is good. There's a lot of other spells that, you know, you pay something to copy instant or sorcery spell. Those do typically require more mana pips, though. They usually require double red or whatever else. There's this is kind of the effect that Rowan gives with the ultimatum, or the ultimate side of it. And so I'm not sure if I love this as a way to do that. I feel like I'd almost rather try to use Rowan and try to get up to the ability, and then just have it as an extra thing that happens anytime that I cast a spell. But if you're trying to combo off and make some, like, a big spell happen a couple times, or, you know, just burn spells, removal spells happen multiple times, this is really good, I guess, to that extent. But you also are just playing 3 mana for a 1/4 body that isn't actually that powerful. That's the side of it I think is not very good, is that the creature itself isn't actually that great. The ability can be pretty decent, but if it was on a decent creature, then it would be actually scary. Even if it was like 2/4 power, then it's like, okay, that can attack in fairly decently and get through a lot of attackers where it's getting in for a couple points of damage. You can make this like an is it aggressive copy spell tempo deck, and this could actually be a decent creature in that. Being at the 1/4 side of things, it's not as good. Solve the equation. 3 mana, search your library for an instant or sorcery card, reveal it and put it into your hand, and then shuffle. So a tutor card, pretty awesome. 3 mana tutor cards are not quite as good in general, but instant and sorcery cards, this is tutor for your board wipe. So if you need the board wipe, there you go. There you have it. This also is tutor for the ultimatum. So, you know, tutor for extinction event, tutor for all the crazy things. So this definitely goes into I think the Sultai ultimatum deck, maybe as a 1 or 2 of, just because that deck is playing some card draw to make sure that it can actually get to all the different things it needs. But it also is just trying to find certain cards for the certain situations. And so I could see this as a 1 or 2 of in that deck, to just kind of like, okay, this will work, as well as maybe even being cast with the ultimatum, because it is a monocolored card, as an extra thing. Like, well, we're also going to go find an ultimatum again for the next turn if you let the Alrund's Epiphany resolve. So this is another thing that's just like, this is actually a little bit busted. I think this goes into the Sultai ultimatum deck, and it's kind of terrifying. And it can also be used in other decks, but that's the one for sure that it can be used in. Practical research, I can't spoke right. Practical research with Will and Rowan in there. 5 mana instant, draw 4 cards, then discard 2 cards unless you discard an instant or sorcery. This is one of those cards that is not very powerful for 5 mana. Drawing 4 cards is nice. We already have Into the Story at 4 mana being really, really powerful. So at 5 mana, this is sweet. There's lots of ways to make this cost less, though, is the biggest thing. If you're playing Will and Rowan decks, this costing 4 mana, drawing 4, yeah, you have to discard an instant or sorcery, but okay. You know, like, I think it's actually a pretty good card at instant speed to be able to cast this for 5 mana. 4, 3, or 2 mana, that's when this gets really busted. And so I think that you try to play this with ways to make it cost less, or with Magecraft to make it better. Mage Hunter, 4 mana. This is basically the opposite of Magecraft. It does it against your opponent. Whenever your opponent casts or copies an instant or sorcery spell, they lose 1 life. So if you know you're going to be playing up against a lot of people that are playing Magecraft, this might be just a fun card to play in like the opening like week of Strixhaven, and try to get a bunch of these out and hope people are playing Magecraft type of decks and just get them instead of them doing anything good. They lose all their life. I don't think this is completely reliant on an opponent playing something else, though, so I don't think it's that good of a card, but it could be really funny. Maelstrom Muse, 4 mana, 2/4 Djinn Wizard, with flying. Whenever it attacks, the next instant or sorcery spell you cast this turn costs X less to cast, where X is the Maelstrom Muse's power as this ability resolves. That could actually be really, really powerful. The biggest issue is it's only going to be 2 less, which isn't that big of a deal for 4 mana. But we're talking about, you know, getting spells to cost less. This is another way to make spells cost less, where you just get to attacking with this. All of a sudden, yeah, it's not the same as just everything costing less, but the next spell being able to cast quite a bit less is still nice. So I'm not sure where to rank this one. I think that it really depends on how powerful the spells are that you get to cast. We've already seen the Magma Opus, which can be really busted, casting less. I think this is interesting. I'm not sure if you actually go for the plan of making this power be even bigger, to then be able to cast even bigger spells for less. I'm not sure if that ends up being worthwhile. At the same time, though, there are 2 mana spells that give like 3 or 4 power to a creature, which means that for 2 mana, you get to ramp up 4, whatever, and you're still casting that spell. So pretty sweet stuff. I do think that Maelstrom Muse can be good. I'm just not sure at 4 mana if it's worthwhile, because playing something on turn 4 and then hoping that turn 5 you get to do stuff is typically when things go bad for you. That's just in Constructed, that's how it typically goes. I'm definitely going to be playing this deck though, for sure, because it sounds really fun. All right, Expression Rehearsal, 2 mana sorcery, Prismari colors sorcery. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and one in the bottom of your library, then exile the rest. So you exile one of them, and until end of turn you play the exiled card. So one goes into the hand. So this is 2 mana, draw 2 basically. Put one into your hand, put one into exile that you might be able to play right away, which can be a land, and then you put the other one in the bottom of the library. So this is actually a really powerful card. So yeah, draw a card, put one into your hand, put one into exile that you can play potentially, and one to the bottom. Sorry, I know I talked about that one over and over again, but that's actually a really powerful card. This is really good. 2 mana, draw 2, absolutely gonna see play for sure. Especially, yeah, this is just good stuff. I like it a lot. Explosive Welcome, 8 mana instant. Deals 5 damage to any target, 3 damage to any other target, so you can't target the same target, and then add 3 mana. So one of the biggest issues with this is that you are actually having to target both the creatures. I think that the way that this one is working, because it's not up to 2 targets or anything like that, it doesn't say anything like that. I believe that if any of the targets cease to be available, this actually just fizzles. And so if you were targeting their face with some of the damage and targeting a creature, I believe, I can't remember how it works. I think if there's any legal target still available, then it still resolves, even if one of the targets isn't available. But you have to have 2 targets to even cast it. So they have to have a creature on the battlefield, and you have to be able to target their face. So if you're wanting this to be, if you're already controlling the board, destroy the board wipe, whatever, you have to have 2 targets available, which I believe can be them and you, I guess. So you would always have at least some targets, but I don't know. I feel like this is still even a little bit situational for a really big spell that doesn't necessarily do a bunch. But you can also cast it for free from the graveyard if you mill it over, and then it becomes pretty sweet and awesome. Hit 5 to the face, destroy one of their creatures, and add mana to be able to cast something else. That actually sounds really fun. So this is a really sweet reanimate spell that I think could be really fun, but you definitely don't want to be casting this for 8 mana. I don't think it's quite good enough for that. Creative Outburst, 7 mana instant, a bunch of expensive spells. It deals 5 damage to any target. Look top 5 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the rest into the bottom of your library in random order, and you can pay 2 to discard this card. So Inspiring Ultimatum is the exact same cost. You do have to be in white to be able to use it as well. But instead of just looking at the top 5 cards and putting one into your hand, you also gain 5 life, and you put all of the 5 cards, you just draw 5 cards. The main thing is, like, this isn't good unless you are going to be using it, basically reanimating the spell and casting it for cheaper. That's where this becomes good. Be able to have other ways to create treasure tokens is pretty sweet. Maybe there is just a straight up like using Magda to get a bunch of treasures and just ramping into the best dragons. There's a lot of cool dragons that just came out, so maybe that's the best way to go. I don't know. So the fact that this is just 2 mana create a treasure token is pretty sweet. So I don't know where to rank that one just yet. I bet this one's meh. 1 mana 1/1 flying. Whenever it dies, you get to learn. Yeah, that's decent. Again, the learn effect is pretty cool. I'm not sure. You can't force this to die. There's enough exile effects now that I'm not sure that everything will for sure die whenever it's out there. Make your mark. 1 mana instant. Target creature you control gets +1/+0 until end of turn. When that creature dies this turn, create a 3/2 red-white spirit creature token. This card I think is actually pretty decent. We've been needing more 1 mana spells to be casting with Magecraft. I think this definitely fills that slot. Even if bad things end up happening in the combat step, or after damage is dealt, you get a 3/2 spirit out of it. So it's still pretty good stuff. And so you can even target the same creature, I think, multiple times, and it'll end up making multiple red-white spirit creature tokens. So this is actually really powerful, I think, and definitely goes into the Magecraft deck if that ends up being a really powerful deck, which in my mind I think it will be. And this one adds to it here. Sudden Breakthrough, 2 mana instant. Target creature gets +2/+0 and gains first strike until end of turn. Sound familiar? We've seen, I think this is Sure Strike basically, but you also get to create a treasure token. It's a Sure Strike that gets you a treasure token, and that means that you can attack in with Magda, survive with Magda, most likely, and giving it +2/+0 in first strike is pretty sweet, like survivability even against lots of blockers, and then also creating a treasure token. That's pretty sweet stuff. I'm actually really excited for this card in Magda decks. I'm excited for it in Magecraft, because you get to make the next thing, you know, you have extra mana to cast more stuff, to Magecraft more often. So I think this is, first off, a really aggro card in the Magecraft deck. This is just another 4 of in that deck that is really, really powerful. And so very, very good. Terrified of it. There's also the other one that I think it was sorcery speed though, but it gives +3/+1, and you learn and gives trample. I can't remember if that was instant or not. Deep Disappointment, 4 mana, each player loses 2 life and you draw 2 cards. Instant speed, this is pretty decent. I mean, you just get to draw 2 cards in instant speed. We've seen those cards be good in general. I think this is a card that would be really cool to copy. That's kind of the main reason. I think this would be a really fun card to copy. Elemental Summoning, 5 mana, lesson card, so you can grab it from the sideboard, create a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. So that's the cost that they're setting up for creating these 4/4 blue elemental creature tokens. Of course, at the common side of things. So I'm not sure how good that actually is as a lesson card. I'm not sure if I would ever play this over just removal and interaction or anything like that. Yeah, this is one of the cards that, even if you're trying to go on the blue and red elemental creature token deck, I'd rather be playing more of those ways in the sideboard and not cast this, and have my lessons in the sideboard even be the 5 mana exile target creature or planeswalker or whatever. That would be better than running this in general. So I just think at 5 mana it's way too expensive. Defend the Campus, 4 mana, instant, choose 1. Target creature you control gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. Charge is 1 mana. Destroy target creature with power 4 or greater is a 2 mana spell that we've seen in other Epic Downfall or whatever. So having this be 4 mana to have the options. Instant speed, even. I wish that this at least would be like give creatures +2/+2. I think then this would be playable. Being it just +1/+1, this makes it a full unlimited card. But hey, modal removal at the common slot in limited. This was a fantastic card in limited. But 4 or greater is sometimes you just have to deal with stuff with 3 power or greater. And so I'm not totally sure I like this card. It's interesting. Frost Trickster. 3 mana, flying 2/2. Whenever it enters the battlefield, tap target creature and opponent controls. That creature that creature just doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. So it's just another tempo type wizard, which it's another wizard, which there is Naban and Historic and everything like that. And I actually think that adding flying to a wizard card that has this type of effect is actually pretty nice. We've already seen just things that tap down and they do get to untap the next untap step is actually pretty nice. Of course, those have flash or anything like that. I do think this can definitely come into the Naban deck or into something with Panharmonicon type effects, things that cause lots of ETB effects to happen. I'm not sure you play this in just like anything in standard, but I think in Historic, in the deck that is trying to play lots of wizards or maybe like Bird Tribal. So this is a fringe card. I don't think it's necessarily great, but it's not terrible. All right, Combat Professor, 4 mana. All right, what I mean is it's not terrible. It has a spot where it can be played. How about that? Let me say it the right way. You could play this in decks and it wouldn't be the absolute worst, but most decks aren't going to like it. There we go. 4 mana, 2/3, flying. At the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control gets +1/+0 and gains vigilance end of turn. Every combat, something gets vigilance. It's not the absolute worst. Limited card, pretty good limited card. Ambitious Poet, 2 mana, 2 whenever it attacks. You can pay 2 life. If you do, it gains flying until end of turn. If you have a deck that this could be decent, just a way to keep getting in for damage in something like the Death Shadow deck in Historic. You get to pay 2 life every time it attacks. That can end up being a pretty useful way to just kind of make your life total get lower. So if you are trying to get your life total lower, this can actually be pretty decent. Otherwise, it's interesting. I'm not sure if I love it for anything outside of limited besides that. Prismari, Pledge Mage, 2 mana, 3/3, Defender. Whenever you cast an instant sorcery spell, it loses Defender and it can attack as though it didn't have Defender. There you go. Typically, we've seen these kinds of cards in the past. I think stuff that are the exact same stuff, just different wording. And historically, they've been meh. Yeah, it's not the absolute worst. It's a good limited card maybe, but it's not that great. Resculpt, 2 mana, instant. Exile target artifact or creature. Its controller creates a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. Angelic Exaltation does the same thing, but it creates an angel with flying for 2 mana. And it's been decent. You do exile the target artifact or creature. The nice thing about this is that instead of just being able to exile just a creature, you get to exile artifacts or creatures, and opponents sometimes have really busted artifacts like Embercleave. So this is a way to deal with an Embercleave or the creature that Embercleave is attached to. And yeah, they get a 4/4, but if it means that you get to board wipe on the next team, do everything like that. So I think this can be played in two different ways. It can be played in the way that you create your own 4/4s by doing stuff and maybe block with cheap spells. If you're using Castle Ardenvale tokens to chump block, all of a sudden you can turn it into a 4/4 and make it a little bit better. I'm not sure exactly where to rank this one. There is already a decent amount of removal for other stuff, but blue doesn't have just Exaltar Artifact, I think, as often. It has like bounce stuff. It has other ways to kind of deal with things in general, but this just straight up exiles it, which actually makes this a pretty powerful card, I think. I'm not sure. A 4/4 is big though. That's not a small creature to give an opponent unless you for sure can deal with it, which then of course you bounce that instead of the artifact or creature you were going to exile anyway. So I don't know. Prismari Campus, this just goes to show that all the different tap lands in the common slot are going to have the Scry 1 ability. And so that's good to know that they're all the Scry 1 ability and decent. Not absolutely amazing, but not bad either. Anyway, that's the end of it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the spoilers for this run through. I by the end of this, I always have a much harder time talking. Like after a while of just saying words for forever, I've still not practiced enough at it to be able to not run over my words, basically. So anyway, these cards are awesome. I'm really excited for a lot of things that are coming out. There's a lot of cards that enable different decks to be a little bit better that are out there already, and that's what gets me excited. There's a bunch of cards that just like create another entire deck archetype of reanimating spells that we haven't really seen before. I'm really excited for that to happen, and we got to see a bunch of the different really big spells that we would be casting into. Being able to discard cards to throw them into the graveyard is really exciting. We also have a few other different spells that be able to let you discard cards into the graveyard to be able to make that work as well. So overall, I'm really excited for what's in this set. Really excited to see how it plays out with all the other cards that are already in the arena format. Let me know in the comments below your guys' thoughts, what you guys think about the different cards here, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks so much. Like and subscribe, and bye-bye.